dry and restless, carrying the smell of dust, cattle, and old wood. The ranch sat wide and alone beneath a fading sky, its fences stretching out like tired arms across the land. Most folks passed it without looking twice. Some slowed their wagons. Others crossed themselves and kept moving. Stories had a way of clinging to places like this, and once they took hold, they never really let go. She stood inside the barn where the light fell in thin lines through the warped boards. Her hands were clenched tight at her chest, knuckles pale beneath the dirt. The cloth lay wrapped around her like a promise and a warning all at once. Her voice shook as she spoke, soft but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "Please do not take the cloth off." The words came out like a prayer, like something learned the hard way. The rancher faced her from a few steps away. He was a man shaped by the land, broad-shouldered, sun-worn, and quiet in a way that made people uneasy. Years of hard seasons had carved lines into his face that no smile could smooth out. He had seen drought strip the earth bare and storms tear barns apart. He had buried cattle, neighbors, and dreams with the same steady hands. Still, there was something in her voice that made his chest tighten. He had found her just before sundown, near the far fence where the land dipped low and the creek ran thin. She had been half hidden beneath a torn canvas, the cloth pulled tight around her like she was afraid the world might steal something from her if she let go. She did not look like trouble. She looked like someone who had already lost too much. The old American ranch was not a place that welcomed questions. People came when they had nowhere else to go, and they left when they remembered why they should not have come. The rancher lived by that rule. He asked little and spoke less. But when he saw her eyes, wide and dark with fear, he knew walking away was no longer an option. Now the barn creaked as the wind pushed against it, and somewhere outside, a gate rattled. The horses had gone quiet, as if they too were waiting. The rancher took one slow step forward. The boards beneath his boots groaned in protest. She backed away until the rough wall met her shoulders. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice low and steady, like he was calming a spooked animal. "But whatever is under that cloth, it matters. Folks are asking questions. The sheriff was here this morning." At the mention of the law, her breath caught. Her eyes flicked to the barn door, then back to him. "You do not understand," she said. "If you take it off, you cannot put things back the way they were." The rancher had heard fear before. He had heard lies too. This felt like neither. It felt like a weight pressing down on the air itself. He glanced at the cloth. It was old, patched in places, stained with dust and something darker that he could not quite place. It was not fine fabric. It was not meant to hide something precious. And yet she held it like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Long ago, before the fences and the brands, the land had belonged to stories. People said the earth remembered everything that happened on it. The rancher had laughed at that once. He did not laugh anymore. Too many strange things had followed him through the years. Too many nights when the cattle refused to settle and the dogs whimpered at shadows. "Why come here?" he asked. "Of all places." She swallowed hard. "Because this land knows how to keep secrets." The word settled between them. Outside, the sky darkened and the first stars pricked through the blue. The rancher felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. He thought of the tracks he had seen near the creek, the way the ground had been torn up like something heavy had been dragged across it. He thought of the look on the sheriff's face when he mentioned missing livestock and a rumor spreading through town. He reached out, slow enough to give her time to pull away. She flinched anyway. Tears shone at the edges of her eyes, cutting clean lines through the dust on her face. "Please," she whispered again, "do not make me relive it." His fingers brushed the edge of the cloth. The moment he touched it, a strange tremor ran through his hand, like the low hum of a wire before a storm. He froze. The barn seemed to lean in around them. The smell of hay grew sharp, almost sweet. "What is it?" he asked, though part of him already feared the answer. She shook her head, lips pressed tight. "If I tell you, you will not believe me. If you see it, you will wish you had not." The rancher closed his eyes for a brief second. He thought of the land again, of how it remembered. He thought of the responsibility that came with owning a place soaked in so much history. He had always believed a man faced what was put in front of him, no matter how heavy it was. "I cannot protect you if I do not know," he said. Her shoulders sagged like the last strength had drained out of her. She nodded once, small and defeated. "Do it quickly," she said, "before I change my mind." The wind howled outside, rattling the boards harder now. Dust fell from the rafters in a thin shower. The rancher tightened his grip and pulled. The cloth slipped back, inch by inch, revealing what lay beneath. At first, there was nothing that made sense. Just shadows and pale shapes in the dim light. Then his breath hitched. His heart slammed against his ribs so hard it hurt. His hands began to shake. The stories he had dismissed, the tracks, the fear in her eyes, all of it crashed together in that moment. His legs felt weak, and he had to brace himself against the stall to stay standing. The barn felt too small, the air too thin. Behind him, the barn door creaked open on its own, letting in a blade of cold night air. Somewhere beyond the fence, something moved, heavy and slow. She watched his face and knew. "You see it now," she said quietly. The rancher could not speak. His mouth was dry, his thoughts tangled. Whatever he was looking at did not belong to his world, yet it was here, on his land, wrapped in an old cloth and a stranger's fear. And as the wind slammed the barn door shut, he realized that uncovering it was only the beginning. The rancher stared at what the cloth had hidden, his mind fighting to make sense of it. He felt like a boy again, standing at the edge of something too big to understand. The barn smelled of old hay and fear now, sharp and heavy. His hands would not steady, no matter how hard he tried. He lowered them slowly, like he was afraid the thing might notice him if he moved too fast. She did not look at what had been uncovered. Her eyes stayed on his face, searching it, measuring his reaction. She had already lived with the sight. She had carried it across miles of dirt road and open plain. For her, the terror was old. For him, it was fresh and cutting. "You believe me now," she said, not asking, just stating a fact. He nodded once. His throat felt tight, like he had swallowed dust. "I do," he answered. And that made it worse. Outside, the wind dragged itself along the fence line, setting the wire to whining. The sound reminded him of nights long ago when his father warned him never to wander too far after dark. Back then, he had laughed at such talk. Men were afraid of hunger and storms, not shadows. Not anymore. He stepped back, giving the thing space, though he did not know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe respect. He pulled the cloth partway back over it, not to hide it fully, but to soften the sight. She let out a breath she had been holding for too long. "You can put it back," she said. "It does not change what it is." They moved to the small room off the barn, where an old table sat beneath a lantern hook. He lit the lantern, the flame flickering before settling into a weak glow. The light did little to chase away the heaviness that clung to the walls. He poured water from the tin pitcher into 2 cups. His hands spilled some on the table, but he did not bother wiping it up. She drank first, her hands shaking as badly as his had. After a moment, she set the cup down and wrapped her arms around herself. "It started far from here," she said. "In a place that looks like every other place until you learn better. Dry land. Honest people. Quiet lies." He listened, leaning against the table, his hat forgotten on a peg by the door. She told him about a job she had taken, cleaning out an old property that had been abandoned after its owner died alone. Folks said he had been strange, kept to himself. Dug where no one else dug. She had needed the money. She had not believed in stories. In the cellar, she found records, journals written in a careful hand. Notes about the land, about what could be taken from it if one knew how to ask. About debts that could not be paid in money. She said she laughed at first. Then she stopped laughing when she realized some pages were newer than they should have been. He did not interrupt. He had learned long ago that when someone finally spoke after holding back for so long, stopping them only made things worse. She told him about the night she tried to leave, about how the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet, how the air pressed in like it was alive, about the choice she had not known she was making until it was too late. Her voice grew quieter, but steadier, like she was laying stones one by one across a river she had already crossed. "I did not take it," she said. "It followed me. Or maybe I carried it without knowing." The rancher looked at the lantern flame, watching it tremble. "The land remembers," he thought again, the old idea returning with new weight. He thought of his own property. The way the grass grew uneven in certain spots. The way animals avoided the far end of the north pasture. He had always blamed bad soil. The sheriff will come back, he said at last. He will ask questions. Others will too. She nodded, they always do. And when they get close, things happen. That was when a knock came at the barn door, slow and heavy. Both of them froze. The lantern swayed slightly, casting long shadows across the walls. The rancher felt his heart drop into his boots. He moved quietly to the door, peering through a crack. A figure stood outside, hat brim low, coat pulled tight against the wind. The sheriff's shape was unmistakable, even in the dark. A horse shifted nearby, snorting softly. The rancher opened the door just enough to step out, closing it behind him. The night air was cold and sharp. The sheriff looked him over, eyes lingering on the barn as if he could see straight through the boards. Evening, the sheriff said. I thought I saw light. Just finishing up some work, the rancher replied. He kept his voice even, though his chest was tight. The sheriff nodded slowly. Folks in town are restless, livestock gone. Strange marks by the creek. Someone swore they heard singing out this way last night. There was no singing, the rancher said. Only wind. The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then glanced toward the dark fields. This land has a way of stirring things up, he said. Always has. If you hear anything, you let me know. After he left, the rancher stood alone for a while, listening to the retreating hoofbeats fade into the night. When he went back inside, she was standing, alert and pale. He knows, she said. Not yet, he answered. But he will. They sat in silence after that, the weight of what lay hidden in the barn pressing in on them both. The rancher thought of all the years he had tried to keep his life simple. Work the land, mind his business. He saw now how thin that wall had been. Near midnight, the cattle lowed restlessly. A deep sound rolled across the pasture, followed by another. The dogs began to bark, sharp and panicked. The rancher grabbed his coat and rifle, though he was not sure either would help. He stepped outside and scanned the dark. Something moved near the fence line, too large to be a man, too slow to be an animal he recognized. The ground seemed to sink beneath its weight. He could not see it clearly, only feel it like pressure behind his eyes. Behind him from the barn came a sound that made his blood run cold. A low hum, steady and deep, as if the land itself were answering a call. She came to the doorway, her face tight with fear and resignation. It is closer now, she said. Being here woke it up. The rancher tightened his grip on the rifle, though he did not raise it. He understood then that this was not a problem that could be chased off or shot down. This was something tied to the soil, to promises made and broken long before either of them were born. The wind shifted again, carrying with it a smell that did not belong to cattle or dust. The dogs fell silent all at once. The rancher took a slow step forward, knowing that whatever came next would change his land forever, and that the cloth in the barn was only one piece of a much larger truth that was still rising from the ground. The rancher did not sleep that night. He sat on the porch with the rifle across his knees, watching the dark stretch of land like it might blink first. The moon climbed slow and pale, washing the fields in a light that made every shadow feel longer than it should have been. From time to time he heard movement, not close enough to see, but close enough to feel. The land breathed differently now. Inside the house, she sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. She had tried to rest, but every creak of the old boards made her tense. She could feel it too, that pull beneath the ground, like something turning over in its sleep. Coming here had been a mistake, but it had also been the only choice she saw. Places like this remembered things. They answered when called. Just before dawn, the noise stopped. The cattle quieted. The dogs lay down without a sound. The silence that followed was worse than the chaos before it. The rancher stayed where he was until the sky lightened and the hills took shape again. Only then did he stand and roll his stiff shoulders. At first light, he walked the fence line. The grass near the creek was crushed flat, pressed into the mud as if by a great weight. Deep grooves cut through the soil, leading toward the far pasture. He knelt and touched the ground. It was warm. When he returned to the house, she was already up. She watched his face closely, reading what he did not say. It is still here, she said. Yes, he replied, and it knows this land now. He made coffee, the smell filling the kitchen with something almost normal. For a moment, they moved around each other like two people who had lived together for years, not strangers bound by fear. But the weight never left. Later that morning, a neighbor rode up, hat in hand, eyes darting past the rancher toward the fields. He spoke of missing cattle and strange sounds in the night. He asked if the rancher had seen anything unusual. The rancher shook his head, careful with his words. The neighbor nodded, not convinced, and rode off with worry clinging to him like dust. By midday, the sheriff returned, this time with another man from town. They walked the property together, boots heavy, questions sharper. The sheriff crouched near the creek, studying the marks in the mud. He ran a hand over his jaw, troubled. "Looks like something big," he said. "Bigger than anything we know." The rancher stood nearby, his face calm, his mind racing. He felt the pull again, faint but steady, like a tide that never quite went out. He knew then that hiding would only work for so long. That evening, as the sun dropped low, she finally told him the part she had been avoiding. She spoke of others who had tried to use what lay beneath the land, of deals made in desperation, of a balance that had been broken. She said the thing beneath the cloth was not the source, but a key. Once it is uncovered, she said, the land starts to answer, not just here, anywhere it has been disturbed. The rancher thought of the journals she mentioned, of the old property far away. He wondered how many places carried wounds like this. How many people lived on borrowed ground without knowing the cost. Night fell again, heavier than before. The air felt thick, pressing down on his chest. He sensed eyes on him from beyond the fence, not watching him exactly, but the land itself, waiting. In town, rumors spread fast. People locked their doors earlier. Fires burned longer into the night. A preacher spoke of judgment. Others spoke of curses. No one spoke of leaving. Near midnight, the rancher heard footsteps near the barn. He moved quietly, heart pounding, rifle ready. He found the sheriff standing there, lantern in hand, staring at the door. "You feel it too," the sheriff said without turning. The rancher said nothing. "This land has always been strange," the sheriff continued. "My father warned me about it. Said some places do not let go of what is buried." A low sound rose from beneath their feet, just for a moment, then faded. The lantern flickered. The sheriff swallowed hard. "Whatever you are mixed up in," he said, "it is bigger than both of us." From inside the barn came a faint vibration like a held breath. The rancher knew then that the night was only beginning, and that the cloth, the land, and the choices already made were pulling everyone closer to something none of them were ready to face. The days that followed felt stretched thin, like time itself was being pulled across the land. The rancher kept working because stopping would mean thinking, and thinking brought the weight back down on his chest. He fixed a broken gate, mended a fence, and checked the cattle more often than usual. The animals watched him with wide eyes, uneasy and alert, as if they sensed his worry and mirrored it. She stayed close to the house now. The barn had become a place neither of them entered unless they had to. Even from a distance, the rancher could feel the low pressure humming beneath it, steady and patient. At night, the ground sometimes trembled just enough to wake him. "Not a quake, just a reminder?" Word spread fast through town. More cattle went missing. A wagon broke an axle on a road that had been solid for decades. Water wells turned cloudy. People whispered about the ranch without saying its name. Some blamed the weather. Others blamed each other. Fear had a way of looking for somewhere to land. The sheriff came again, alone this time. He sat at the rancher's table, hat in his hands, staring into a cup of coffee he did not drink. "I have lived here my whole life," he said quietly. "I have seen hard things. This feels different." The rancher nodded. He wanted to tell him everything, but he knew once words were spoken, they could not be pulled back. Still, the land was not giving them time. That evening she asked to walk the far pasture. The rancher hesitated, then agreed. The sun was low, casting long shadows that made the grass ripple like water. They walked in silence until they reached the place near the creek where the ground still bore marks. "This is where it listens most closely," she said. She knelt and placed her hand on the earth. The rancher felt it then too, a deep pulse, slow and powerful. It did not feel angry, it felt wounded. She told him then about the last entry in the journal she had found. Not a spell or a demand, but a confession. The man who wrote it had finally understood that the land was not something to be taken from. It was something that needed to be answered. He was too late, she said, but maybe we are not. The idea settled into the rancher's mind, fragile but bright. He thought of his years working the land, of how he had learned its moods and limits. He had always believed respect mattered. That night, the tension reached its peak. The air grew heavy, and clouds gathered without rain. The dogs refused to leave the porch. From the barn came a deep vibration that shook dust from the rafters. The rancher stood with her in the yard, both of them staring at the closed doors. The ground shifted more than before. A sound rolled out across the fields, not loud but vast, like something turning over deep below. The rancher felt fear, but beneath it was something else. Hope. Lights appeared along the road as neighbors gathered at the fence line, drawn by the sound. The sheriff arrived, followed by others. No one spoke. They just watched the land. The rancher stepped forward, heart pounding. He did not know what would happen next, only that running was no longer an option. He placed his hand on the barn door, feeling the vibration beneath his palm. Whatever comes, she said softly, we face it together. The sound beneath the earth grew stronger, then steadied, as if waiting for an answer. The rancher took a breath and opened the door, knowing that the next moments would decide the fate of the land, the town, and everything he had ever worked for. The barn door swung open with a long groan, and the sound beneath the ground seemed to pause, like it had been waiting for that moment. The lantern light spilled inside, catching dust in the air and throwing soft shadows against the walls. What lay beneath the cloth no longer felt threatening. It felt tired. The rancher stepped inside first. His legs shook, but he stayed upright. She followed, her face calm now, almost steady in a way he had not seen before. The vibration beneath their feet slowed, becoming a deep, even pulse, like a heart settling after a long run. He reached for the cloth again, this time with care instead of fear. When he pulled it back, the air in the barn changed. The pressure eased. The smell of damp earth replaced the sharp tension that had lived there for days. The thing beneath the cloth did not move, but it no longer felt wrong. She knelt beside it and placed both hands on the ground. The rancher watched as her shoulders relaxed, as if something had finally let go of her. Outside, the wind died down. The dogs stopped barking. The people gathered beyond the fence leaned closer without realizing they were holding their breath. It was never meant to be carried, she said softly. It was meant to stay where it belongs. The rancher understood then. This was not about removing something from the land. It was about returning it. He grabbed a shovel from the wall and began digging where she pointed, right there in the heart of the barn, where the ground had always felt heavier. The earth gave way easier than he expected. Each shovel of dirt felt warm, alive. When the hole was deep enough, they worked together, careful and slow, lowering the thing back into the ground. As it settled, the vibration faded completely, replaced by a quiet so deep it felt like relief. The moment the soil covered it, the lantern flame steadied. The barn felt like a barn again. Just wood, hay, and old nails holding memories instead of secrets. Outside, the ground stilled. The clouds drifted apart, revealing stars sharp and bright. A breeze moved across the pasture, gentle now, carrying the familiar smell of grass and cattle. Someone near the fence let out a long breath, and then another. The sheriff removed his hat and wiped his brow. The rancher stepped out into the yard, dirt on his hands, heart finally slowing. The sheriff met his eyes and nodded once. No questions, just understanding. In the days that followed, the land healed itself. The creek ran clear again. The grass rose where it had been crushed. The cattle returned on their own, calm and steady. No more strange sounds. No more restless nights. In town, people stopped whispering. They spoke instead about weather and crops and ordinary worries. The stories faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of life returning to its proper place. She stayed for a while longer. She helped mend fences and cook meals, her laughter slowly finding its way back. The rancher learned her story fully then, not just the fear, but the strength it had taken to carry it as far as she had. She had not been running away. She had been searching for a place that would listen. One morning she stood at the edge of the pasture, watching the sun rise over the hills. The rancher joined her, hands in his pockets. "I think it is done," she said. He nodded. The land felt right beneath his boots, like an old friend who had finally been heard. When she left, it was not in the middle of the night or under the weight of fear. She rode out with the sun high and the road clear ahead of her. She did not look back, and she did not need to. The ranch returned to its quiet ways. Seasons changed. Fences weathered. The rancher carried on, but something in him had shifted. He listened more closely now. To the land. To people. To the spaces between words. Sometimes at dusk, when the wind came down from the hills just right, he would think of the night the ground breathed and the fear that brought them together. He would touch the earth with his boot and feel only calm. The land remembered, yes, but it also forgave.